Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sustainable Packaging 101, your top regulatory questions answered, presented by SpecRite, the leader in specification data management. My name is Allison Del Grande. I am a demand generation marketing associate here at SpecRite, and I'll be our moderator this morning. I'm joined by two amazing sustainability experts, Katie Krast and Kate Barry. I'll give you a brief introduction and then let them do the talking here. But Katie is a product manager at SpecRite. Katie has a background in packaging engineering, where she worked in the food and beverage industry, followed by consumer electronics at Amazon. She pivoted to working in data management at SpecRite, where she added experience in customer onboarding, then strategic partnerships before transitioning into her role as product management. Across all of her titles, Katie's passion for sustainability has been incorporated into her work. Thank you so much for joining us, Katie. I can't wait to hear what you have to bring today. And Kate Barry is a manager of packaging optimization at NTT Data. With more than 12 years of sustainable packaging design, Kate has been focused on creating tailored strategies with a holistic approach for the entire supply chain. From process optimization to environmental material analysis, Kate has succeeded in making measurable impacts in multiple industries. Katie, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's get into the content here. So when it comes to sustainability, it's really no longer a nice to have. It's recently transitioned into being a necessity across all companies and in all industries. Regulations are growing, and we'll talk a little bit more about regulatory pressures, but there are hundreds of sustainable packaging regulations globally. How is your company responding? It's not just about tracking the right data, but really being able to report out on that data regularly. How are you doing that today? How is it scalable as more regulations are implemented? And consumers are demanding more transparency now more than ever. We recently conducted a sustainability survey of more than 1,000 consumers. And it was really interesting to see that not only do consumers care more about sustainability, but they are also considering changing purchasing decisions based on sustainable packaging. More than 50% said they are willing to spend more on eco-friendly products. 74% said they're more likely to buy products from companies who are being transparent about sustainability. But almost the same amount of respondents don't believe companies' sustainability claims. And a huge challenge remains recyclability. Consumers are still confused about when and how to recycle products. I know I'm always confused. And this is something that companies like yours can definitely help with. And like I said, it's not just consumer pushing companies to be more sustainable. The government is now stepping in and regulating it as well. In case you haven't heard, there's a thing called Extended Producer Responsibility, or EPR, that's been implemented across the globe and expanding here in the US in recent years. Now, in its simplest form, Extended Producer Responsibility is a set of regulations designed to incentivize manufacturers to make more sustainable products and packaging decisions, keeping waste out of landfills, hopefully. They place the responsibility for the environmental impacts of products on producers, not just at the point of manufacturing, but for the entirety of the product lifecycle. The laws and regulations governing each region's EPR policy approach are varied and growing, but they all share a common characteristic. Now, as you can see from this map, EPR laws in the US are growing, with more coming into effect in 2025. Katie, I'd love to hear from you. Maybe you can speak briefly about why keeping up with these regulations is so challenging for companies.
Yeah, so I mean, of course, these are global, really, EPR regulations. They've been in Europe for a long time for packaging, and they're coming into the US now. We're seeing the growing movement and more coming every year. But one of the things that's challenging, especially for the US here, it's one country, but each state is having different laws passed. So we're looking not at just one cohesive EPR rule. These are going to be very different. So keeping track of what the different laws are in each state might have a different goal for what they're trying to reduce with EPR. So all of that means that we're going to have to collect different data and make sure that we're reporting on things in the way that each state requires. But speaking of reporting, one of the complexities here, or perhaps not complexities, but question marks, is that the reporting requirements haven't really been set yet. So this is something that is, again, it's constantly moving, constantly growing, and the states have passed their laws, but they haven't specified exactly how things need to be reported yet. The formatting and the exact data haven't exactly been set. So that's something that we're, keeping an eye on, and that is just keeping things more difficult to keep track of as we move forward.
Thank you. I think moral of the story here, if your company is not already preparing, you need to be. I feel like each state with its different regulations is gonna call for different things. So the sooner you can get ahead of that, the better. So what is the real risk of non-compliance? Katie, I'd love your insights here. What does it look like?
Yeah, I think it really depends on each company's situation, right? What are you producing? Where are you producing? How much are you selling? Do you know what materials you're using? You might need to change equipment if you're changing packaging, and that could have more of a cost, right? So think, lay out what your plan is and really understand where you might be at risk and what you might be charged potentially, right?
All right, and so sorry, I think I have a bad internet connection here, but I think Kate had just finished up. And one thing that I just want to flag as well is that we shouldn't forget about how our performance on EPR compliance can be taken by consumers. We're not seeing this yet, but entirely possible that our consumers out there are going to keep track of what companies are doing well, what companies aren't doing well, what companies aren't even reporting, aren't caring about the EPR regulations. And so consumer perception, as we know, can play a big part in our success as producers. And so keeping that in mind, when you're deciding whether or not to move forward with an EPR strategy, I think is an important risk to keep in mind.
Great. Well, with that, let's get into the top questions we've been hearing from teams around sustainable packaging. The first one being, what should my company be tracking to comply with packaging EPR regulations? Katie?
Yeah, I'll take this one here. So first, we want to start with the basics, and that's going to be the material. And we're talking about the material class. So are we paper, plastic, glass, but also the specific material that's going to be important as well. And if you have multiple materials in your product, you need to be able to understand what those different materials are. So you can't just say, one of the materials. Getting that full material list is going to be important. Next, you need to know the weight of each of the materials that are going into your packaging parts, as well as your post-consumer recycled content. Bonus points also for if you have other types of recycled content, keeping track of those as well. But PCR is definitely going to be that top one. So those are the basics: your material, the material weight, your PCR content. You should absolutely know that for all of your packaging parts. But you'll also need to know, and that's more from the packaging engineers here, but from a company product side, you'll also need to know how much of your product is actually sold in each state in the US or globally, but focusing here just on the US here, so that we know what EPR fees will actually apply and what we're going to need to pay each individual state for EPR. So those are going to be, the big things, the big pieces of focus. But as you get those pieces together, you're going to find that the EPR reporting requirements are going to advance. They're going to ask for more information, and so knowing Is there a presence of opacifiers or metallized layers? What inks are used in your packaging products? Is it reusable? Or are there any disruptive packaging components or materials in there? And as well as, of course, have any hazardous substances in there as well. And so those are the types of things that we're going to need to understand as well, and need to start collecting now, so that in the future, when these EPR reports do advance, we're prepared for them. So, right now we can start small, but we're really going to need to expand our knowledge of the data and just every little detail of the packaging, because I truly do believe that we're going to need that down the road, and it's better to start now than to start a bit later.
Great. Well, thank you. Hopping into our next question here, Kate, I would love your input. How do packaging EPR regulations impact costs and operations?
Sure. Well, this links a lot to what Katie just was saying, right? It really depends on the material and how much you're using, where you're producing, and what changes you're going to need to make to your operations. So if you need to, again, change your caps or change your labels or change your case erector because you've done something different with your materials to make them more sustainable and EPR focused, then, those operational costs are going to increase. But it really depends on what your operation is and how many plants you have and what materials you're using, and how compliant you are today. If you know what data you have in place versus what data you might need in place and what regulations are going to be in play, is really going to come down to what's the bottom line cost impact.
Awesome. Next question. What is the timeline I should be targeting?
So this again all varies, but in the U.S., the earliest one, we're looking at Colorado and Oregon in mid-2025. Maine is late 2026, and California SB 54 by 2027. So again, get that data in line now. Know where your baseline is. You can understand when these regulations actually start collecting fines, how much you can expect to pay.
Right, and just to tack on there, like put a big exclamation point on what Kate just said. No matter the date that's going to apply to you or what states apply to you, maybe you don't sell to everyone in every state in the US, but you definitely should start preparing now, because getting all of the required information, getting the data for each of the data points for each of your packaging components, it's not a small task. And we at SpecRite, we've helped a lot of companies do this, and it always takes longer than you expect. And so getting everything in place, preparing now, starting to gather that information is only going to set you up for success.
And I think the other part to that is supplier collaboration, right? So you are collaborating with your suppliers to say, yes, this is the spec, this is the data that we need. Yes, it's accurate, and we can go forward from here, right?
Mm-hmm. Great point.
Awesome. Some great call outs there. Next question, how best can I keep up with increasing regulations?
I can start on this one here. So one of the things that I like to flag is partnerships and getting the right information. So one of the companies that I work closely with is Lorax EPR. So they're an EPR specific software that is there to help companies do EPR reporting. So companies like that are going to help you to understand what information you do need, and based on where you're selling, help you actually do that reporting. Now that is like a full the Cadillac, the full service type of help. But that is going to, I think, really help you to get all of the information that you need without sweating it, just kind of like have that insurance of it.
One strategy I like to do here is kind of create a map of where the products are being sold and then what regulations fall to those places. And then, okay, what data do I need specifically for each one of those quadrants? And then I just kind of go back and review and visit that impact and say, okay, are we on track? Are we not? What do we need to do to make sure that we're aligned and everybody's aligned? And then there's also, other great resources like SPC and APR and Ameripen, all which have great updates that they're putting out there frequently.
Okay, yes. And so, I was describing the Cadillac of services, but those are great call outs, APR, Ameripen, SPC, those, they're part of their job is to keep track of all the regulations. So fantastic resources, as Kate said. And I really love the practical and visual component of what Kate was describing as well. Having your map and saying, okay, here are the different regulations that are in different states in the US, and just having that visual, I think, could be really helpful. And, it could end up looking like a crime scene map or something, red yarn attaching the different states, but knowing the commonalities, I think, between all of the different EPR regulations can help to make it perhaps less overwhelming, and when you can see all the commonalities there.
Perfect. Some great insights. Thank you both. What other things do I need to be keeping an eye on as it relates to sustainable packaging?
Yeah, I would say here is that, what's trending globally. What is Europe doing in Asia? They're typically 5 to 10 years ahead of the US, and they can have a lot of insight to what might actually be coming, like the French Repairability Index or certain things like that. How do you better design your product for it to be circular? What policies are changing in the US regarding recycling or composting? What does that really look like? How is that going to affect how you sell and make your product? And then the other key thing here is just leverage your network. Talk to your packaging colleagues and other people who might have information and be in the same space, because they, can gain nuggets and information from people that you may not have to.
Yeah, I love
Katie,
that. Definitely we'll need to leverage our networks and, learning from each other. I think that with sustainability, everybody's trying to work together, and there's more collaboration across companies, across colleagues, that I think is really inspiring. So really love that. And in the spirit of collaboration, Kate mentioned earlier working with your suppliers on your partnerships to help you get the data that you're going to need. She said, let's make sure that we can, let's compare your spec to my spec. Okay, yes, this is the right data. That is so important. And if you have a good relationship with your supplier, that is going to be so much easier. And so one of the things that, you might even want to be thinking about here is, do I have the right partners? Do I have the right suppliers that are going to help me get to, my next sustainable stage? Are they going to be partners with me, or are they just going to be supplying me? And I think that we're really at a stage where we need those partners. We need people that are going to work with us to make sure that we have, yes, all of the right data, that's trustworthy data, and that, when new things come along and we need more information, they're there and supporting us and helping us get there. But past that, once you get all the information from your suppliers, it's really important to also own that data. If your suppliers are, your single source of truth for your packaging information, then they are going to be, you're going to have to email them all of the time to ask, like, hey, what's the PCR content of this item? Or what are the dimensions of this? And I mean, everybody here probably gets that. But really owning and managing all of that data and having your single source of truth yourself is going to help you with that reporting in the future. We're not talking about a shared drive where you put PDF folders. We're talking about a digitized platform where you can take every little detail of your packaging part and put in the information so that then it becomes reportable. And in the future, that's just going to be so much easier. So that's my that's my data plug here. But then one other thing that I think you need to keep an eye on. We've talked a lot about EPR because it's a hot topic. We don't really know. So many people don't really know what to do or where to start. But like Kate said, also there are different regulations out there, and so you're going to want to make sure that you don't have this hyper focus on just EPR because there are other things happening as well, like the UK plastics tax was passed a couple of years ago, I think, and so that's also changing the landscape of packaging. So I think that generally being aware of all of the different regulations, not just EPR, is going to be helpful.
Awesome. Well, those are all of the questions that we have. If there's any questions that you have that we missed, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We will circle back to a Q&A as we wrap up, but we would love to hear your questions as well. But with that, let's transition into some of the common pitfalls companies are making when it comes to packaging sustainability.
Yeah, so I think the biggest one here is aggressive goals with no plan. You are looking to remove EPS or PVC, and you don't actually even know what types of materials you use in your components today, how many SKUs you have, what it's going to take to change, what other backup materials you can use in place. Like, it's just way too aggressive to start off without a plan or a goal or knowing where you are. Another one would be, relying on teams to provide information. Sometimes it's, supply chain operations was going to provide that, or marketing was going to provide it. Whoever those contacts may be, it's important to have the team together and say, yes, this is the information that we have. This is what we agree on. We can move forward. But it's also very possible that it takes a long time to get that information, and the ball can get dropped and it gets stalled, and all of a sudden you lose a month or two. We've seen that several times, where you're actually trying to make a plan, but nobody really has the information. And the suppliers play a big part in that too, right? It's that collaboration and partnership of, you need the information from them as well to ensure that you guys are moving forward together. And then the other common roadblock is just paralyzing, not taking any action at all, because you don't know what regulations are going to impact you. You don't know where to start. You don't know what materials you're using, but it's really just start small and take those steps and say, okay, let's start with one SKU. What materials do we use? How much of it do we produce? Where is it sold? Those sorts of things. Those are the biggest roadblocks that we typically see. Katie, I don't know if you want to add some.
Yeah, I'll add just one more here, and I'll call it that's not my job. So this is, when everybody knows that something should happen, and something should be changed, whether that's, EPR or just generally, moving forward with a sustainable packaging strategy, which, I've talked about in another webinar. Go watch that if you want to learn more about making your sustainability strategy. But when there's not anybody that kind of owns that work. Let's take EPR for example. It's not really always clear who owns EPR related initiatives. I think that it can take a collaboration between packaging and procurement, legal, IT. I think probably 10 other organizations within a company, but it's so important to have that one stakeholder that pushes the project forward. So whether that's an executive sponsor, or whether that's just somebody that is gung-ho about doing it, but I just want to flag that can absolutely be the people that are on this webinar right now. If your company isn't doing anything about it right now, you're just going to need that one person to start the project and keep pushing it forward, because there are so many different stakeholders that are going to be involved, and all of them could be pointing fingers saying, all right, who's really in charge, but that can absolutely be you. So call to action, do the thing.
So this one we've seen, you know, a couple producers and a couple examples where people and companies are trying to get ahead of what's actually coming. So I'll just speak to this quickly, but there's a California producer of making nutraceuticals, and they want to prepare for SB 54. So they, you know, they said, what do we need to know? What packaging data do we need to have? Let's create an analysis tool so we can go through each SKU and say, you know, if it's a 25 ml bottle versus a 100 ml bottle, how much material do we actually use? And let's calibrate that on a year basis and say, okay, if we change by this percentage, we've potentially reduced our fine by 100,000 or 200,000, whatever those numbers are. But we built a tool to actually allow that deep analysis of, if we make this one change, if we take out this percentage of plastic, if we change it to recycled content, what does that look like? So we had, you know, 25 different packaging options that would say, okay, here's how we could tackle SB 54 if we needed to. And another example is a US bakery chain. They wanted to capture what their packaging material savings were. So we just started tracking every change that we were making. If it was like reading the board or taking out slip sheets or you name it, we just started to compile all that information of what material we were actually saving. And it turns out after a year of doing that, you save a lot of materials without even, you know, knowing or tracking on that. So I think that points to collect the data early and know what changes you're making, and that can have a big impact essentially.
Yes. +1, collect the data. It's, yeah, you're going to be able to tell all your stories once you start collecting the data. So love that. Also, Kate, I think that I want that tool that you helped that you analyze SB 54 alternatives for. That sounds super awesome.
It was fun. It was complex, but well worth it in the end.
Awesome.
Perfect. Before we wrap up, Katie, any final takeaways you want to leave us with?
Yeah, so we'll take the first one here. You just got to start somewhere. In order to measure where you've gone and how you've improved, you need to know where you are now. So collecting all of the information that is required for APR, but also just to show progress on any sort of sustainability goal, that's what you need to start collecting now, so that you can make that baseline and see where, you know, what progress you've made in the future.
And as I've said before, assigning a champion to move it along. It takes one person to take action. That can be you, like Katie expressed, but it's just important to know who that key person is and who's going to continue to move it along. And then the other thing that pairs with that is just understanding what the drivers and the insights are to make the change. So what regulations are specifically affecting your product? What do you need to know to say, we are preparing ourselves for these EPR regulations that are coming?
Awesome. And with that, we will open it up for any questions from the audience. So if you haven't already done so, please type your question in the chat and we will get to as many as we have time for. The first one I'm seeing, is there a website or place with this information to start that you can point us to?
Ooh, good question. So I'm going to go ahead and say what Kate was talking about earlier with some of the resources. So the SPC resource, they have a cool web page that will tell you all of the existing regulations and what's upcoming as well, and you can kind of filter it based on what you're looking for. So I think that that's probably something that we can send out as a post webinar goodie. So we'll do that. Kate, anything additional to add there? Any other sites that you'd like to go to?
No, I think that's definitely the best one to start. It's got a lot of information on what status the bill is in and, you know, what the producer has to do, what the limit of the material is. So it's just really handy tool. So thanks guys for putting that one together.
Yeah, big claps for SPC there.
Awesome. We will definitely be following up with that. Another question, you mentioned this earlier, but what are the KPIs you need in your packaging specs?
Yes. Okay. So the top ones that we want here are going to be your material, the weight of that material, weight or percentage of if you have multiple materials in there, because you can derive one from the other. Anyway, so material, weight of material, and PCR content. So those are going to be your big three that you want there, and dimensions, et cetera, on top of that are going to be very important too. So if you can think of it, track it.
I love it. Next one, as more and more regulations come into effect, how can we scale reporting? Any advice?
That is a great question.
I would say it's about having a centralized system to track it, and everybody knows what that system is and how information can be available and when it's updated. Without having it centralized, it's impossible to know where you actually are and who's making changes, right?
Right. And I love that you use the word centralized, because if one team has a system and they're maintaining it and getting all the information from different teams but putting it in, it's not going to be up to date, because the team that they got it from sent it over to this team B to enter it in. There's latency there. So if it's that centralized platform that all the teams are using and agreeing upon and updating, then that's going to give you that immediate single source of truth and just the best data. So I think that it has to be something also that is well utilized by all your different organizations.
Awesome. And then next question I'm seeing, will everyone get fined or will big brands be first?
So, great question. I can't say that I know all the nitty-gritty details. As far as I know, where the companies that are going to be targeted first, and I shouldn't say targeted, the ones that are going to be held accountable the most first are going to be the big producers. So if you're a mom and pop shop, you're selling pies out of your basement, you're not going to be held accountable in that wave. So we're definitely looking at those big producers that are shifting lots of volume of packaging materials within an area. Okay, I don't know if you have any more specifics there that you can share.
No, you explained that well.
Great. Well, that's all I'm seeing. But if anything else pops up, please feel free to reach out to us, and we will give it our best shot. But I know we've thrown a lot at you today, but wanted to make it actionable. We have this simple survey that will help you better understand your gaps in areas of risk, called our sustainability report card. So once you take this survey, one of our team members will reach out to you and help guide you through the best next steps to not only set your goals, but also to reassess your current goals or how to just generally make progress. Super quick survey and really insightful as to where you're standing and how you are looking compared to your competitors in the industry. So a great resource. And that's all we have today. Thank you so much, Kate and Katie, for sharing your expertise with us. We hope you found this session informative. And if you'd like to learn more about SpecRite, or again, if another question pops up and you'd like to reach out, please visit us at specrite.com and specrite.com/get-a-demo as well for more information and to get connected to the team. So Kate, Katie, thank you guys so much again. And have a great rest of your day.
Bye.